It's a wonderful pleasure to welcome Adam Johnson on this podcast. He's a country musician based in Saskatchewan, Canada. Welcome to the show, Adam. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great.
All right. So, first question. So we're at the new year of 2024. I wonder if you can tell us about some of the highlights that happened to you, either personally or music-wise, in 2023.
2023 was actually a great year for me. Um, I finally got to get in a good run of shows where I played about 40 shows last year, which was really awesome. I hit a few kind of bucket list things. We have a festival in Saskatchewan called Country Thunder. I've been like attending that for years, and I got to play the songwriter around this year, so that was really, really cool. I played the Saskatchewan Country Music Awards, and I also won the award for Emerging Artist at those awards. So that was really cool. I had a couple other nominations too, Male Artist of the Year and Album of the Year. Um, and then yeah, I did some other really cool festivals last year, some really cool shows, and I put out a little bit of music too. So that was all really cool, and I can't wait to carry it on into 2024.
Awesome. So last year you put out a single titled Blame It On Me. So tell us about that song.
So that song was my so I released an EP 2022, and in 2023 I started working with a different producer. Just wanted to kind of change things up, and Blame It On Me is the second song with that producer, and it's also the second single off of an upcoming album right now. So it's the second song off that. And I wrote that in a really weird place because I had written the entire album. We had all the songs picked out. We knew what we were gonna do. And I was in like a really bad state of writer's block. Like I, for whatever reason, just like couldn't come up with stuff. I was struggling. And like all creatives do, I was doom scrolling through TikTok. And when I was scrolling through there, I found an interview by James Taylor, and he was talking about how he wrote one of his big hits by taking one of his favorite songs and like rearranging it, creating something new out of that song. So what I actually did to write "Blame It on Me" is I took Zach Bryan's "Something in the Orange," obviously changed up the chord progression a little bit, changed the melody, the lyrics completely, and try to just keep the vibe the same and like the energy, not the core energy of it. And I rocked it up quite a bit. But once I had that song, I was like super excited on it. And I sent it over to Bart, my producer, right away. And I said, hey, this has to be on the album. I love this song. I want to put it out. So that's kind of the story behind Blame It On Me.
It's a cool song. Yeah, I like it quite a bit.
Thank you so much.
So tell me about the upcoming album.
So, with the upcoming album, I've had a few songs for a long time that I've wanted to put out. Some of them, a lot of people like they're not the quintessential like radio song, so it's kind of harder to like convince producers and stuff to put it out as a single. So it allows me to kind of venture a little bit more. And it's not like I'm doing anything crazy or experimental, but it allows me to kind of touch different kind of styles and depths in the country genre. And basically, the plan is to release it one single at a time, with a couple songs coming out at the end. Um, Tentative, we're aiming for the fall right now. Um, I've got a few songs coming up throughout the first half of 2024, and uh, hopefully, everything keeps rolling like it is. Like I've had a ton of great support in the songs so far. Drinking with the Boys, Blame It on Me, and my newest single, Blue Moon Girl, are all going to be on the album. And I'm just trying to create something that's like honest to me. I don't want to have like I want to make songs that I love to play, I love to sing, and that I can feel attached to. So that's kind of the goal with the album. And I'm really excited to have a bit bigger catalog, more music to share with the world. And there's nothing I love more than stepping on a stage and playing my own tunes. So
It's wonderful. And I look forward to the release of the new album. And I suppose when that happens, we can chat on this podcast once again.
for sure, I'd love to.
Has your album got a title yet?
Um, we got a few ideas. I'm not ready to divulge anything yet, but we're working on it.
Mhm.
Um, it'll be right now we're kind of focused on getting the singles out there. I have one coming up in February. We haven't announced it yet, but keep your eyes out. We'll have an announcement coming soon. And then a few of my favorite songs. I have one song called 3 Minutes that's coming up right away. I'm really excited for that one because it's always been kind of a crowd favorite. I've always loved the song. And for whatever reason, I've been with a few different producers and they either say they don't know what to do with it or they like struggle to like find something that works. So it took me three producers before somebody finally said, okay, I know what I want to do with this song. And we finally got something that I'm really, really happy with. So I'm really excited for the upcoming releases.
Cool. So, did you say that a song of yours is titled 3 minutes, or is it a 3 minute song?
So it's titled 3 Minutes.
Oh.
The without giving away too many spoilers, I wrote the song because I've been writing a lot of like radio country music, and I was getting kind of sick of it because there's a lot of kind of rules that you have to follow. Like, um, they're not really requirements, but they're kind of like rule of thumbs. And like as an indie artist, it's very hard to get any type of radio traction if you don't check all these boxes. So I felt really kind of stifled and restricted from that. So I wrote the song as kind of like I'll keep it within all these kind of boxes, but I'm gonna write it about how much I hate and I'm stifled and how difficult it is to like have these like deep, like intense emotional moments in your life and boil that down into 3 minutes, which is like the radio standard for song. So that's kind of the inspiration for the song. And I found it kind of turned into a little something more. Like it has this feeling of kind of seizing the day, right? Like taking advantage because time's fleeting. You only have so much time with your friends. You only have so many like great moments. You can't just like let them pass through by and you have to take advantage of every kind of moment you got. So that's that's why it's one of my favorite songs. It kind of has two meanings in a sense. So
Mhm. And in regards to your single coming out this month of February, I think by the time this episode airs, it'll already have been out. So I tend to keep the release of my episodes like 2 or 3 months after it was recorded.
okay, perfect. Yeah, if that's the case, then it'll be in February here we're releasing the acoustic version of Blue Moon Girl.
Mhm.
And you should have 3 minutes out as well. We're aiming for March for that one. So
Cool.
hopefully you can go listen to that song now that
Mhm.
when this comes out.
Okay. So as of right now, your latest single is Blue Moon Girl. So tell me about the writing process of that one.
That one's a unique one. I really like that song. There's like a story behind it. So what had happened is I was at this party and I met a girl there. And you know those like nights where you just like click really well, get along, have like a great kind of connection. And at the end of the night, we were exchanging numbers, and I pull up my phone and realized that I was being an idiot earlier, and I had broken my phone. So I was like, "Hey, like, here's my number. I won't be able to get back to you right away because obviously my phone's a brick right now." And basically, I thought I'd get it fixed right away, but kind of things came up, and I didn't get it into the shop right away. And by the time I got my phone fixed, like, it took a little bit longer than I thought. So like, it wasn't just like a couple days. It was like not just a week, it was like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. So I turned my phone back on and I had this message waiting from a new number and I knew exactly who it was. And I felt so terrible for keeping her waiting. So I wrote the song for her to make it up to her.
Mhm. I see. I hope that things going well with Mystery Girl there.
No, it's quite an old song. We're no longer in touch, but it's definitely it's definitely like a cool experience. I like to like I find like I'm kind of 50-50 on whether I'm writing about something that like actually happening to me versus like kind of feelings and emotions kind of thing. So whenever I get like a good story to write about, I always love to tell it.
Of course. Yeah. Country music is a storytelling medium, I think. I've been listening to quite a bit of Johnny Cash lately, and there's a lot of stories in his songs. Um, so, but as you've said, usually when you tell these stories in the medium of a country song, you are limited to some 3 minutes of, well, music. So, in the process of songwriting, how do you keep such a story, a beginning, middle, and end, tightly woven in that short period of time?
Sometimes it's really difficult. I mean, obviously there are people who are really good at it, and that's why they make good money for what they do. But I think it depends on the song, right? Like there's some like very good 3 minute songs that tell everything succinctly, and just like something like Blue Moon Girl, that was never gonna be 4 minute song. It was very easy to keep to 3 minutes because it was easy enough to say everything I needed to. Versus good example is one of my favorite songs is I'm blanking on the name of it, but like there's a lot of like old like storyteller songs that reach 4 minutes, 5 minutes that you can't really contain them to 3 minute structure just because like you can't get everything across, right? So that's kind of what frustrates me is like sometimes a great song is just a little bit longer, right? And that's kind of how I feel about like that's part of the inspiration for 3 minutes is yeah, a quick love song is easy to tell in 3 minutes. How do you talk about friend passing away or different things like um sometimes like heartbreak from a long relationship, right? There's too much to that story. And sometimes to make that a 3 minute song, you have to water it down too much. So that's kind of how I feel. And even still, like now I have songs that um we have to cut out verses and cut out storylines just because uh it's difficult to get um streams, difficult to get radio play, different things like that. So it's a constant battle with creating art and creating consumable art.
Mhm. So, have you ever tried going over that time limit, like making a 4 or 5 minute song?
Oh yeah, I have a ton of them. It depends on what my goal is for the song. Like I have a song coming up here called For the Record, which we had to shorten a bit because I really like the song and we're planning to use that for one of our like prioritized singles. So a song like that, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're gonna try to run it at like 4 minutes long. So we had to cut out a verse and kind of trim a few parts. But then there's other songs that I have, nothing that I've really released, and I don't think there's anything on this album that's particularly long. There might be one longer song on it, but um, for those longer songs, I hope to put them out, and like there's a reason they're longer. Like you can't fit in the story I'm trying to tell if you cut them down. Um, it just happens to be I'm at a point in my career where it doesn't make sense to put out a long album with a bunch of long songs. And I mean, with country music, you can tighten things up pretty easily. Um, there's a lot of ways you can cut out solos and stuff. So sometimes the longer songs are a bit indulgent. Um, but I mean, that's the point of making music is like being like inventive and creative and finding different ways to like make people move or make people sing. So um, it's definitely something I've played with, but not something that I consistently do. I just kind of let the song length speak for itself, I guess.
Of course. So, how do you select a single from the batch of songs that you've either composed or recorded?
So generally, it's a really long process from writing the song to recording it. So what I'll do, obviously, the other thing too is like with the release strategy I'm using, most of my songs are going to be released as singles first before I release the album. Um, but basically, when I'm like deciding what songs I'm going to send to radio and stuff, it's kind of like a twofold. Like I'll evaluate things and be like, oh, I think this has a really good chance. This feels like a radio song. Like it's similar to in kind of structure. It's got a very good hooky chorus is something that you look for. Um, and then the other thing too is like because I've written them so far before I record them, it's very easy to like play them at certain shows and you start to kind of crowd test them. Obviously, like I'm working with a producer. I have like people I'm close to that I can like run it by them and see what they think of using a single as whatever or this single. So it's kind of by committee process. And um to me basically it all boils down to is whether or not the song is like viable for radio, because other than that you can release songs however you want and you'll be able to find an audience and somebody who likes a good song. But radio can be very picky, so you have to be kind of wary of that.
Mhm. Tell me about the last time you've tested the song in front of a live audience.
Is there a song in particular?
Well,
Because like
the last time you did it, like the most recent time that you did it.
um I've basically been playing Blue Moon Girl since like leading up to the release. Like I've played it live a ton of times. What you're kind of looking for is like the audience reaction.
Mhm.
Um they're not necessarily, sometimes if you have a really good song, they'll come up and like, oh, I love that song that that's unreleased or whatever. What I find for the most part, the two kind of keys is like if you have a good song, people will generally quiet down and like really intently listen. And you can also kind of see how the room reacts and is moving and is like feeling the song. Just like for example, like I know that 3 minutes works really well with the crowd because I've played shows where they've like called for an encore of me to come out and play the song because it wasn't on the set list, and then play this unreleased song, and there's people in the crowd singing along. So that's something that like tells me like obviously people do like the song. Um, so that's why I'm uh, always trying to see how people react to a song. Does it get them moving? Does it get them kind of like introspective? And then kind of go from there and see what I want to like turn it into, I guess is the best way to kind of describe that.
Do you find that there are certain stories that are unique to tell in country music as opposed to the other genres of music?
Um, I'm sure a little bit. I think one thing about music is the like core feelings and ideas are generally the same across all genres. It's just how you tell the story. So, like for example, even like Blue Moon Girl isn't a great example because it's more leaning to the pop direction. But like when you tell a love story in country music, you lean into not the country cliches, but like the country lifestyle and how you fall in love in a country song is different than a pop song, right? So I think it's more so how you tell the story than the story itself. And now obviously like the really like folky kind of songwriting, you can get some like really unique stories that really focus in on the culture of Americana or like American country music, right? Or even Canadian country music. But I do think that it's really just the lens you tell it through more than anything else.
Mhm. I find that within country music, or at least the kind of country music that I was exposed to, there are a lot of songs about growing up, um, from the writer or the performer's view or life as a young boy or girl. And also there are a lot of songs about marriage too, which is both of these I find quite lacking in other non-country popular music.
Um, definitely the marriage. They very much focus on marriage. I think part of it is like there is quite a religious element to country music, because a lot of country music has come out of like the southern United States, where they still hold like fairly intense religious views, and I think part of it is like that wholesome idea. Country music very much clings on to the idea of the um traditionalism, right? So I think that's why they focus on marriage a lot. And as for like growing up, I think that's you mentioned it earlier where country music is very much about storytelling. And I think the reason that you see like the growing up kind of songs in country music more often is because the lyrics are more so introspective and take the time to take you on a journey, tell you a story. Whereas pop and rock music can be a lot more like visceral and intense, and it's more about the feeling as opposed to like telling the story. So I wonder if that's possibly why you see those trends pop up a lot more in country. And I think that's also back towards like the lens you tell a story through, right? So you might have like the same kind of emotional beats of like a rock song, but country kind of tells them the growing up story in more of like a oral tradition, I guess, like more of a storyteller. Whereas rock and roll is maybe more focused on the rebellion of growing up, different things like that.
Mhm. Yeah. I wonder if you're a fan of Dolly Parton.
I am. I don't listen to a ton of her. He's an amazing songwriter, though. That's the one thing that I always take away from hearing a Dolly Parton song.
Yes, something I've always wondered. Again, I'm not too familiar with the musical work or the other acting stuff that Dolly Parton has done, but one thing that always amazes me is the enduring appeal of her. I mean, she's been around for decades at this point, and to this day, people still think of her as a celebrity, a public figure instead of a has-been. So I wonder how, in your view, how does she maintain this level of belovedness?
Um, I think one thing it comes down to is the songs. And the one thing about the music industry is everyone's going to tell you it's all about the songs, which is very much true. Because I don't know your music listening habits, but I'd be willing to bet that what draws you to an artist is the music that they make, right? There's a song where you're like, oh, I absolutely love this song. You put it on repeat, listen to it a ton, right? And I think with Dolly Parton, she has a lot of like very good songs. And she's also at a point now where she's kind of like past that stage. Like artists generally have like their career go up and then it'll peak at some point, and
Mhm.
then it kind of goes down a little bit as they're not like the cultural zeitgeist anymore. But then as they get older, they rise back up if they have enough catalog and enough I don't know what the right word is, but have had enough success, they kind of become like a legend. So I find like music listeners really hold the classics in that regard. So I think that's part of the reason she's still so popular is because people look back and they go, "Oh, not only did she have great songs, she has some of the greatest songs." So I think that's probably why, be my theory.
I see. I think there there are certain artists who, in the prime of their days, create some of the best music known to man, and there are those who, well, in the prime of their days, they were merely popular.
Yeah. I think part of it's volume too. Like you'll see like artists who have like one single, or like one huge song, especially like one hit wonders and stuff. People definitely don't tend to hold them to the same standards, right? Whereas like someone like Dolly Parton has a very large category with some like enormous songs. So I think that's also partly what does it. Because I mean, realistically, if you let maybe it's your favorite song is like a one hit wonder from like the 90s or the 80s or something, obviously you might be inclined to go see them. But if there's a song that was like a number one hit 10 years ago and you're thinking like, oh, like I remember liking that song, but you're probably not going to go pay a lot of money to go see them live. Versus when you can look at Dolly Parton's catalog, you can go, oh, well, like 9 to 5 is my favorite song. And I Will Always Love You is such a good song that she wrote. Like there's all these things, all these songs that you can go back to and like very much connect to. So I think that's a big difference is like having like a large catalog helps a lot too. Another like good example is out of the country realm, but Green Day right now is very interesting because I would say like for a moment there in the early 2000s, they were the zeitgeist. they were a massive band. And now they're still a huge band with like a huge following. But you'll notice that they just put out an album, but they don't get the same kind of energy around that album. But when they play one of their older songs or one of their hits, that's what people are still attached to. So I think like you have to kind of cement yourself with like the best music that you put out has to be very endearing and kind of stand the test of time.
I see. Yeah, I've had a an up and down relationship with that band. For a time, I liked their music. I was introduced to it around the age of 11 from my cousin. Um, but nowadays, I think they're a band who got lucky twice with two of their albums becoming big hits, and the rest are quite forgettable. But
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
if you have two big albums, that's a lot of songs, right?
oh yeah,
I definitely think to me, what very much impresses me about Green Day is like to me, American Idiot was like a very impressive album because it very much took what was going on and it's very much a snapshot of what was happening at that time. And I think obviously like you can agree or disagree with the politics that they're espousing, but at the end of the day, they did a very good job at looking at American culture, what it was like, and they very much did what punk rock does best and like critiqued it, right? So I think obviously a bit of it was timing and they happened to be creating this album just at the perfect time. But at the same time, it's hard to like discount how difficult it is to levy a critique like that and do it in a way that people can connect to.
yeah. I remember in that album there are like two songs that are like 9 or 10 minutes long, which are which are quite impressive. Um, and that brings me to one of the reasons why I never really gravitated to punk rock, whether it's British or American, is that every song that I listen to from them, it always sounds like they're trying to get the song over with as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that's like a really interesting thing about punk rock, is it's fast and short. And I think the idea is like punk rock is kind of similar to country in the sense that um, it's not as much the obviously country is more about like the style of music, but punk rock isn't as much about like the instrumentation as it is the message of the songs. So I think it's kind of similar where country music is very focused on the message of songs too, not as much in like the same way that punk rock is. But I think that's part of the reason. And a lot of the time, a lot of the early punk, they were really poor musicians too. So
Yeah.
that kind of leans into it. When your focus of writing the song isn't on having like long, like modulating parts with like complexity, it's more about being straightforward and getting your point across as like meaningfully as you can. So I think that's kind of where that comes from. I definitely think it really hurt the genre because people refuse to kind of stray and move the boundaries a little bit from like the 2 minute short songs.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think the heyday of punk rock was quite short. I think it was just the final 5 years of the 70s. I think it was 75 to 79, and then people move on to other things.
Yeah, and I think that comes to there not being a lot of substance to like the musicality of it. And punk fans are notoriously bad for being, I don't know if gatekeepy is the right word, but like they're notoriously bad for being like, oh, well, this song's too long. It's not a punk song, or like having very
Mhm.
rigid kind of definitions of what punk music is. So I think that's part of the reason that it lost its like um popularity so fast. But I mean, another part of it is that like obviously it's a very abrasive style of music, which is very tough to like sell to the masses. And at the end of the day, what makes like the genre just huge is you have to appeal to the masses, right?
Mhm. So, do you get the same kind of puritanicalism in regards to the country music genre?
Um, It depends. I find it's the traditional country fans that tend to be like the most um opposed to change, which makes sense. Like there's a lot of people who I know 90s country is held in a very high regard. And then some people really like to them country is like Johnny Cash style of country or like Americana. So I find some people can be very resistant to like new kind of styles or experimenting with the genre. But at the same time, I think country is a very like mass appeal, especially right now. Like there's a lot of people listening to country compared to in the past. And I think because you have so much like outside listeners that maybe aren't like salt of the earth, I only listen to country, like that is my identity music listening. Um, I think there's more people who are open to different influences and whatnot. So you get a little bit of that. But I think that's going to be any genre too. Like you look at rock, people um very much dislike modern rock for some reason when there's a lot of really great music being put out, but all the rock fans are too busy like stuck in the past and wanting just another one of their favorite bands. So I mean, I think any genre of music, you're gonna run into something um of a resistance to change and experimentation.
Yes, of course. I wonder if I've encountered a lot of people who say that they listen to anything but country music. That's just, I guess, the circle that I encounter. I wonder if you've have encountered the same sort of responses, and if so, how would you convince them to give country music a try?
Honestly, I definitely have heard that a lot. Like I kind of used to be that way. I started like listening to a lot like when I was younger, I listened to a ton of rock, very much uh punk kind of scene. And like I still love that kind of music. And that's what I actually started writing for music before I kind of transitioned to country. Um, but I think part of the problem is it's just the stigma of country music. Um, and I will admit what I didn't like about country music is I'm not a huge fan of like the 90s country music. And the reason that is because there was a lot of like boring production in a sense. Like it was like they like and like I mean it's great musicianship. Like the 90s might have like the most talented players in any genre of or era of pop music. But the issue is like it's very dry, it's very rooted in its southern roots. So it's like it's very hard to be from a different part of the United States or the world and connect to that down home kind of feel of country music, I think. And I think it kind of alienates people because pop music is very much anyone can listen to pop music and connect because it doesn't really um bring in a like specific influence, whereas country is very culturally tied to like the southern US and specific areas that have this unique kind of worldview and this unique kind of experience in life. So I think that's a big reason. And the other reason is sometimes it can be very cheesy, if that makes any sense. Like you can have your very much like the joke is always, oh, my dog ran away, my truck broke down. And I mean, I've heard a million songs where it's about a broke down truck and whatnot, or it's a very sad song about like losing your girlfriend or wife or whatever, right? So I think that's the reasoning that uh people are so opposed to it. And I think it's very difficult to convince them otherwise unless you can find a way to get them to connect to the emotions and like the almost culture of the song, I guess.
The way I see it, in my experience, the people who say that they would not listen to country music are those who think that country music is what you call it, hillbilly white people music. And because they do not grow up around that culture, they don't find that they can relate to it. Um, I guess what my response is that there's a certain commonality between the great country songs and also the great songs of other genre, like say blues music. When you when you boil it down to essentials, a song by Hank Williams contain the same ingredients as say a song by Lead Belly or Robert Johnson. Um, I mean, they come from different cultural milieus, but they often deal with the same themes of human life.
Yeah, like I think I agree. And I think the problem though is like exactly what you said, people see it as like white hillbilly music, right? And I think that comes down to the culture of it, right? Where like though like a Lead Belly versus a Hank Williams song are quite similar. However, Hank Williams very much leans into that culture of like the Southern US and that kind of ideology. And I think that's what puts a lot of people off. It's
Understandable.
like they, yeah, right. Like, um, living in New York is entirely different than living in Texas or Tennessee, right? It's a very different cultural experience. And I think that's where you get like the disdain for country. Like a good example is living in Canada, in Saskatchewan, Alberta, a little bit of Manitoba, but especially Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's very lots of agriculture. Um, it's much more similar, and it obviously is quite a bit different, but it's a little bit more similar to those like the parts of like southern US, like the central southern US there. So there's like a lot more country fans. There's a lot more like people who are into country music in Alberta and Saskatchewan versus if you go to BC, it's a very different cultural landscape there. So I've had friends from BC who they talk about, they're like, oh, like in BC, if there's like a country band playing, lots of the time it's almost like a theme night. It's more of like not a joke, but more of like an departure from your cultural norms, like more for fun, versus like Saskatchewan and Alberta have very like deeply passionate, like connected, like country fans and country artists and everything. So I think it's hard to connect to something you don't understand, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course. I think we've touched on the topic of people who are being purists of when it comes to certain respective genres. I certainly don't see myself as one in regards to country music. However, I am somewhat peeved by this certain trend where people who are in country music wishes to incorporate it with like the different genres like rock or rap in order to gain mass appeal. I remember a few years ago there was that famous song, was it Old Town Road?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a rap song with country music flavor to it. Um,
yeah,
so and and people and it hit number one on the country music charts. And yeah, that was an odd moment, but I do know that in within like the country music genre, contemporary times, there are a lot of country music songs that sound like rock songs.
yeah. I think like that's one of the weird things about country is because it's such like we talked about, like it's very hard to connect to it culturally if because it's so embedded into that lifestyle that for country music to reach that mass appeal, it has to kind of step away from that traditionalism a little bit.
Mhm.
And and I think that's why you're seeing that. I do think it's important for any genre to be free and be able to like experiment with different sounds and the combining of genres, which at the end of the day, I think genres are kind of stupid. Um, but I do think it's very strange. Like a song like Old Town Road is very much like it doesn't feel like a country song. And like in my opinion, it shouldn't be a country song. I understand that there's like a lot of like um controversy surrounding whether it should or should not be. Um, but like another one too is like are you familiar with the song Fancy Like by Walker Hayes?
No, I do not actually. Tell me about it.
It's the Applebee's song. You might
Hmm.
be familiar. But he goes like fancy like Applebee's on a date night, like that song. Um, to me, that's very far away from a country song as well. So I find like there's a certain bounds that you step over, and it's like, why are we putting this on country radio? Why are we treating this song as a country song when there's some really good more traditional songs? And I think the other thing too is the traditional country never went away. It just wasn't as popular for a time. And I think part of the problem is all the people who are the traditionalists complaining that, like, oh, well, 90s country is the best. Why isn't it like that? Like, I love Brooks and Dunn, and they'll never be a better band. And it's like, there is like the Zach Tops. I think that's who I'm thinking of that do that older style country still, and or like a Cody Johnson. And those people exist, but all the traditionalists won't listen to them because it's new music, and they're just what it is they're just stuck in an era where their favorite music they were young and their favorite music was like very relevant to them. So I think that's a big part of the traditionalist argument as well, is you kind of get stuck in an era of music or a type of music, and it's hard to like branch out after that. If that makes sense.
Um, I believe in the last year there was that one country song that got really popular, also spontaneously. Rich Man North of Richmond by Oliver Anthony Music. And it's a
Yeah.
song that I really like because it didn't follow the trend of contemporary country music. It was a quiet song and it was lyrically profound and provocative. And it rings true. Um, obviously every song or every story has some embellishments, but you can still find a grain of truth to it. And to me, it's almost as if the performer, Oliver Anthony, is expressing what he truly feels there. So I wonder if you listen to it and how you feel about
I it's hard to be around music and not have heard that song.
it.
Um, I find that's a super interesting song. Um, because like I think going back to when I'm talking about my song 3 minutes and how I get frustrated with like all the restrictions and everything of radio, I find that that song is like a really interesting case because it basically does almost everything that radio doesn't like.
Hmm.
Like the production is like just him and his guitar that he recorded quickly, and it sounds amazing. But like country radio is used to playing this like very like polished, uh, lots of like arrangement and everything, which is not that song. And I think it's also very interesting in how that's tied into the culture too. Like obviously the second verse of that song is quite controversial.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is I don't think he holds particularly like right-wing views or like negative views on different on what people think he was critiquing there. I just think that comes from where he grew up is like every single person, like not every single person, but a lot of the people that he's around would be housing views that are way more critical and way more politically leaning. So like for him, he was just kind of pouring out his emotions. But I think the non-country listener looks at that and sees that song as almost like a right-wing rally cry, right?
Yeah.
Even though I think it's far from it. I think it's just someone looking at the current situation of the world and how it's challenging for a lot of people and how he thinks that like things should change, right? So I find it a really interesting song. Um, I definitely think it didn't have like the staying power for me. The first couple times I listened to it, I thought it was like very interesting, but for whatever reason, it just didn't like hold me for a super long amount of time. And I don't think it's an indictment on the song. I think it's just not, sometimes you just it's not your favorite thing, right?
Yeah, that's perfectly understandable. Um, so it was a very interesting song, but nevertheless, so have you ever had to like balance between what is traditional and what is new when composing your own music?
Um, a little bit. Going into this album, um, I kind of decided like I don't want to put a bunch of pressure on myself to follow trends or to like tease anybody. When I like to me, when I create music, I want to create something that I love, and I don't want to sit there in a laboratory and be like, oh, well, if I do this, then I'll be able to get on the radio, or if I do this, then I'll appeal to like the traditional fans. Like to me, what I want to do is just make the best song I can, and then once I get that song finished and completed, then I'll figure out how to like, because really genre is just like a marketing tool. And I think if you're writing, unless you're like using genre um, as a filter for your art, I think that focusing too much on, oh, does this sound country enough? Does this sound whatever? I think focusing on that is just gonna water down or restrict you on what you're trying to create. So I think my goal is to just make the best song I can and then create something that sounds cool, that's interesting, that's new, that and I mean sometimes you want to try to push it to where something that hasn't been done a whole time because I mean we've all heard a million songs about a breakup. How can you put a new spin on that? Or how can you um, give it a unique sound to like the country genre? So that's kind of what I look to do. Um, just create and see what comes out of it. And then if people don't like it, tough to be them. As long as I like it, I'm happy because I'm the one who has to play it every night, and I'm the one who has to have it attached to my name. So
So tell me about some of the music that you're listening to right now.
that I'm listening to right now. I'm all over the map. My listening tastes are absolutely crazy. For a while now, I've been really into like female pop music, like not like the top 40 stuff necessarily, but like kind of Phoebe Bridgers type stuff, like maybe indie pop is a better way to describe it, but it's almost very singer-songwritery and like they with like the very quiet singing, like Billie Eilish kind of brought that into the mainstream. Phoebe Bridgers is like a good example. So I've been listening to a lot of that. Um, Obviously, I'm always listening to country music. I just always have like songs on my playlist. Whenever I find something that really catches my ear and I get really into, I'll spin it as much as I can. And then I'm always on the rock side of things too. I love like, especially like modern rock. Like obviously, um, it kind of is all over the place. It's hard to like pin down what it is, but um, anything I can find that I can connect to and enjoy listening to, I'll have it on. So it's hard to pin down exactly what I'm listening to.
Yeah, I'm of the same stripe. So what are some of the things that helps you maintain your creativity?
That's a tough one. I've actually found recently, so I work part-time as well, but I've been doing music full time as my main source of income for basically since the pandemic.
Oh,
And when music becomes work, it gets way more difficult to be creative because it's hard to find the time to just like free yourself, right? Like, because I spend so much more time now, like, obviously, I'm gigging a lot. So it's important to practice and make sure that I have like the music I already have out or the cover songs that I'm going to play down pat really, really well. And obviously there's a big business side to it where if I want to play, I have to reach out to bars, I have to organize shows. There's a bunch of different admin work. Like if you want to send your song to radio or even just uploading a song takes a fair bit of work. So I find that more recently, as I've gotten busier with music, I've had less time to create, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get that balance. Um, but I do think part of the reason I'm so drawn to music and what why I'm a musician is it's just kind of part of me to create. Like it's something that I can't hold back. I think this is more of like a common like sentiment among like writing, but you don't do it because you want to, you do it because you have to. And I think that's a big reason that I always keep my creativity.
I see. Yeah. So, what are some of the what are some of the most challenging parts of being a touring musician or performing musician?
Um, there's a lot of challenging parts. I think the industry has changed quite a bit in the last little while. Obviously, like it's easier now than ever to like prop up as an independent artist and to start your career moving. But at the same time, we're also living in a time where um your hotels cost more, your gas costs more, your food costs more, but people are less likely to spend more money on concert tickets because they're also more strapped for cash as well. So it's a very difficult industry to make money in, um, which obviously we're not in it to make money because there's a lot better ways to do that. But in the world we live in, it's very difficult to put 100% of your time into something and not be able to pay the bills, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. Another big part is it's just can be a grind sometimes. Like you have to be very disciplined. Um, you can't go out clubbing before you perform because you have to keep your voice good for the performance. Like um, you're up there for 3 hours and it takes a tremendous amount of focus and energy expenditure. It's just it's the funnest thing in the world, but it takes a lot out of you. So I think those are the two things that really make it difficult is the financial restrictions and just the discipline to stay at the top of your game.
And what is the best part of being a touring performing musician?
The best thing about being a performing musician is performing. But I guess the other thing too is like if you're releasing music, that's another really cool thing. Like to create something and be like, it's out in the world, there's people listening to it. Or like when I've hear my song on the radio for the first time, like that is like such an surreal experience because it's something you've dreamed of. It's like, oh, one day I'd love to hear my song on X station, and then it happens, and that's amazing. But I think definitely the highlight is when you're up on a stage and you're performing in front of people and you're connecting with it could be 500, it could be 1200 people sitting there like experiencing the same thing. You might not all be experiencing it exactly the same way, but it's just this like adrenaline high and this connection and experience that you can't really recreate in any other way. So I think that's definitely the reason that I do it.
Right. So, final question, Adam. What does music mean to you?
Music kind of means everything. It's like I'm rarely not listening to music. It's basically a massive part of my life, and I think most importantly, it's a creative outlet. It's a way that I can express myself. It's a way that I can funnel my energy and channel my energy into it productively. And I think like um, it makes you feel right, like it's the whole round of emotions. So I think it's one of those things that it's like it means like almost everything. Like it's just part of me, I guess.
All right. I think that's a good way to end the show. Thank you very much, Adam Johnson, for joining
Awesome.
us.
Thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast.